Today we're going to talk about how many gallons of water are in your pond. A question I get all the time that people struggle with is understanding how many gallons of water are in the pond. Now when they build it, they go through some formulas and then they read on the internet and they kind of get an idea. Maybe their pond builder builds it and they tell them how many gallons the pond is. And so frequently I'll come to a pond and they'll tell me they have a 5,000 gallon pond when clearly it's not that big. And so, just by sight, I can tell you from my experience that I know the pond's not 5,000 gallons. So oftentimes I have to break it to the homeowner, easily that the pond is really not that big. Today I'm going to show you a couple of formulas on how to do that and some methodologies that you can do to figure out how many gallons your pond is. If you build a brand new pond and you haven't put any water in it, this is a very good way to do it. You can either get a water meter on your hose, and you can connect the water meter to the hose, and then you can fill your pond and it'll tell you exactly how many gallons your pond is. If you check the water meter at the street and you can read it and your toilet or sinks don't leak, and you read that, you can determine how many gallons go into your pond that way as well. Another trick you can do to figuring out how many gallons of water in the pond is you can take the hose, turn it on, and have it filling into a 5-gallon bucket with a stopwatch. Okay? Water's filling the bucket, you have the stopwatch going. As soon as that water hits 5 gallons, you click it, and then you set the hose free, and then you know that it takes 10 seconds or 20 seconds to fill the 5-gallon bucket, and then you do the timing and you do the math, and you can figure out how many gallons your pond is, and that's going to be pretty close, pretty accurate. Now that's with a pond that has no water in it, and you're getting ready to put water into it. Most of the time, people determine, they want to know how many gallons of water they have in their pond, and the pond is already full of water. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. I'll give you a couple of formulas, and I'll put them down in the comment section, in the description section of the video, so you don't have to write them down. You can just look down there. But coming back to my aquarium days, when I was doing aquariums, the dimensions that I knew how to check for water volume inside a box or a rectangle, an aquarium, would be length times width times height. Okay, length times width times height, and I would do it in inches. So if it's 4 foot, it would be 48 inches. By 2 foot, by 24 inches, and by height, 24 inches. So all of those numbers should be in inches. Length times width times height divided by 231, and that would give you the total gallons volume inside that box or aquarium. Now, it gets a little different if you go with feet. And so typically when we're looking for how many gallons in your pond, you're going like a 10-foot pond by a 12-foot pond by 2 foot deep. So now all these measurements are in foot, okay? So 10 by 12 by 2 foot. And then you multiply that by 7.48, and that'll give you the total volume, total gallons of the pond. Where it gets tricky is if you have that pond, oftentimes there's shelves inside the pond that step down. So you can't just be 100% accurate by saying, hey, the pond's an 11 by 16 pond and it's 2 foot deep. Because you can't just do that, because you might put rock in there. You might have a shelf that comes in and it's not a complete box. It's not a complete rectangle. So you have to work a little bit harder to get really good accurate measurements. So let me help you make that decision, how to get that done. If it's an 11 by 16 pond and the first shelf is 12 inches deep, are you with me? You can do that measurement and you can do the formula and get how many gallons are in that first shelf of the pond. Now the second level of the pond, let's say it goes down another 12 inches, then that section of the pond, maybe it's a 6 by 8 section that's 12 inches deep. You do the formula and you can get a pretty good close estimate about what that is. Now if the pond's oddly shaped, we're taking a little bit of a guesstimate, but it's a way that we can at least get somewhat of a realistic number of how many gallons the pond is. Now, I do have one more trick for you, and it's a little bit more complicated, but I find this is a really good way to do. Now, why do we need to know how many gallons are in the pond? You need to know this for a couple of reasons. You need to know how much water you should be changing regularly. If you're going to change 10% of the water once a month, how much water is that? How much dechlorinator conditioner do I need to add to the pond? How much beneficial bacteria should I be adding? If it's 1 scoop per 1,000 gallons for beneficial bacteria, what if you think it's a 5,000 gallon pond and it's only 2,000 gallons? Then you're throwing money away by putting extra product in there, correct? So that's really not that big of a deal, but it becomes a big deal if you have a problem and your fish get sick. If you have to start applying medicine to the water, it becomes very critical because we do not want to over-medicate. If you are one of the people that wants to put algicide in the pond, which I do not condone, I don't want you putting algicide in the pond, there's better ways to do that. But if someone was to put algicide in the pond and they thought the pond was 5,000 gallons and it's really only a 2,000 gallon pond, they could overdose the pond and have a complete fish kill-off. So these are the reasons why it's important to know how many gallons your pond is. Plus, it's just fun to say my pond's 5,000 gallons, right? So if you we recommend putting pond salt in the pond, and we recommend keeping it 2.1%. That's what you're going to find out in nature. I mean, if you check the local lakes and streams, it's probably going to be around 0.1% saline or salt levels, however you want to say that. So, you know, when you get the tap water out of the tap, they've stripped out the salts, they've stripped out all these things, and they put chlorine in there. So, you know, we want to put some salt back in there. We want to put the dechlorinator in there. Now, if you have a pond and you've never put salt in there, this is going to be how it goes. You want to do those measurements I told you to get somewhat of a realistic, you know, guess of what the total volume is. So if you think you have a 2,000 gallon pond, then we can apply salt to the pond, a good quality pond salt, not water softener salt. You know how I feel about that. Put a good quality pond salt in the pond, and then we want to use a hydrometer to test the saline levels in the pond. We want to know the salinity of the pond. I use a good electronic hydrometer, and it will tell me the level of salt that's in the pond. So if you think you have a 2,000 gallon pond, what we would do is we would put 1 pound of salt per 100 gallons of water. Okay? So, you know, 10 pounds per 1,000, 20 pounds per 2,000. So if you think you have a 2,000 gallon pond, I would send you home with 20 pounds of salt. You put it into the pond, and then you let it dissolve out after about 24 hours. Then we can take a water sample and we can test it, and then we can do the math to figure out exactly how many gallons your pond is. Now, if you don't have a hydrometer, you want to go to a local pond store that's good and has those kind of things. Either purchase one for yourself. They're a little expensive. I think they're around 89 to 129 bucks, somewhere in that range. And but we have them here, and our staff just knows how to use them, so we can help our clients and that come in and do that. So I'm going to give you the formula. I've always done this like a wild guessing thing. It's always been like, hey, we're pretty close to this. So it was funny because I actually was doing this on Periscope the other day and was talking about it, and I was talking to my wife and my son, and I was saying, hey, what's the exact formula? Do you know the formula? Because we kind of guess a little bit, and we go, we're about here. We're usually pretty darn accurate. We had one of our customers, his name's Joey Moss from the desert. He's on our Periscope. Lance's Papa is his handle. And he wanted to know how many gallons his pond was, and we did this formula with him. And we came up with 850 gallons. Like, we were just kind of like, well, it's approximately this, and we put this much, and your water level's there. We did the saline test. We came up with 850 gallons. And I said, what if I have to be more accurate? What if someone wants the exact formula? How do we do this? And my son, he's so dang smart. He's super brilliant. He's 16 years old. He thinks he knows everything, and sometimes I think he does too, but he said, oh, Dad, that's stoichiometry. And I went, what did you say? I never even heard the word. That's stoichiometry. That's when, you know, you take the levels of the salt and you dissolve it out and you get the percentage and you divide it by such and such. And I was just like blown away about how smart he was. So my son and my wife figured out the formula. If you want to know it, it's pounds, like how much pounds of salt you put in, divided by the percent that you get once you test the water, divided by 2.2, divided by 3.785, and that gives you the gallons. So after Joey was here, we sent him home. We're like, you're 850 gallons. We think we're pretty darn close. That's when we did this formula, and it came up to 877 gallons was his actual true gallons. So the way we've kind of been, you know, massaging those numbers throughout the years has always worked. But now, because of the Ask the Pond Digger show, because of Periscope, because of my dedication, you guys, we worked real hard to get those numbers for you, and we're gonna put it right here in the description section so you can figure out, yourself how many gallons your pond is by adding a good quality pond salt and testing it with a hydrometer. So the question of the day is going to come back to you. Do you really, and I mean, do you really know how many gallons your pond is? And I want to know, I want you to write down that number, and then I want you to do the test, and I want you to calculate it back and make sure that you're right on track. So that's your homework for this week. And until next time, you know what to do. If you want me to answer your question on the show, put hashtag #AskThePondDigger, put it up on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, and I'll do my best to find it on that social media platform and get it answered right here on the show. Thank you so much for watching.